Wow, what a Sabbath here in Sydney. This event is surely living up to its theme word, Ignite. It's a privilege to worship with you and to reflect on that single word chosen to characterize this weekend experience. Because the word suggests light, I have entitled our meditation this morning, Light Up the Darkness. Those words are lifted from a short passage in Eugene Peterson's translation of 2 Corinthians 4, 5 through 7. Remember, our message is not about ourselves. We're proclaiming Jesus Christ the Master. All we are is messengers, errand runners from Jesus for you. It started when God said, "Light up the darkness," and our lives filled up with light as we saw and understood God in the face of Christ, all bright and beautiful. If you only look at us, you might well miss the brightness. Now, fascinating images come to mind upon hearing the word ignite. To set a fire, to begin to glow, to illuminate, to consume by burning. It's a word associated with fireworks and dazzling displays of combustible energy. How fitting that this word should be chosen to refer also to spiritual energy, to faith power, not just firepower, to light that illuminates the mind and not just the atmosphere. No doubt the organizers of this weekend also had in mind a sense of mission here in Sydney, a city well known as a major global cultural and economic center. In its 2017 report, the Australian Bureau of Statistics estimates Sydney population to be in excess of 5.1 million. One of the most cultural cities in the world. More than 250 languages spoken. In the 2011 census, 36% of the population reported having been born overseas. Now, it's one of the most expensive cities in the world, yet it's ranked 10th in the world in terms of quality of living, according to the 2018 Mercer Quality of Living Survey. Price Waterhouse Coopers in 2012 ranked Sydney 11th in the world in terms of economic opportunity. It's replete with foreign banks and multinational corporations. Sydney is promoted as an economic powerhouse. The Globalization and World Cities Research Network classifies Sydney as an alpha world city due to its influence in the region and throughout the world. With all this, what more could you want? Yet I suspect that for many, especially the followers of Jesus Christ, the attractiveness of Sydney is mixed with an awareness that there's also risk. Danger lurks here, not just physical danger. The convenient and comfortable location presents formidable challenges to the life of faith. In many respects, you must live in this atmosphere of prosperity and progress with the realization that you are an alien, a foreigner, a citizen of another place, and an ambassador of another kingdom. Every disciple of Jesus Christ, whether in London, Tokyo, Paris, Johannesburg, New York, or Sydney, will face the intense pressure of a secular culture to compromise on the central commitments of Christian faith. The pressure may be so subtle as to not even feel like pressure. Instead, it may be disguised as a natural and logical inclination to blend in with the crowd, to go with the flow. The question we all must face is, how do I live in faithfulness to God while pursuing a career in a culture that worships other gods? How is it possible for every aspect of my life, career, relationships, finance, morals, habits, entertainment, intellectual pursuits, to be referenced to Jesus when my environment is apathetic or hostile to anything related to the life of faith. Now, it may seem counterintuitive to search in ancient times for answers to foundational questions for life today. Some 2,500 years ago, 4 young men faced exactly the same questions we struggle with now. How do you live a life of faith in a culture increasingly unreceptive to a transcendent God? 3 of these young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, provide an example of enduring loyalty to God in the face of life-threatening pressure. Every boy and girl in the primary Sabbath school knows the story. Every adult needs to understand the underlying issues that were at stake in the drama. In the 7th century BC, the Babylonian Empire had become the dominant power in the Mediterranean region. The city of Babylon, with its massive walls, the Ishtar Gate, the Hanging Gardens, was at the pinnacle of its influence. Nebuchadnezzar's armies had subdued Judah and sacked Jerusalem. The place was in ruins. People with remarkable potential were uprooted from their surroundings and deported to Babylon. Disaster has struck. A time of cataclysmic change is in the air. Routines have ended. All the structures of daily life are in disarray. No more synagogues, no more sacrifices, no more priests and ceremonies, no more religious education classes. Times have changed. Their infrastructure has collapsed. Their programs are in shambles. The orderly processes of everyday existence have been swallowed by chaos. The question is how to survive in this environment. For these young men, all the props of their lives are gone. No home, no family close by, no job, no church school, no bank account, no life insurance. Every single source of security has vanished. In a moment, they suffer loss of status, roots, references, traditions, customs, worship place, possessions, and freedom. Now, Nebuchadnezzar has an ambitious plan for these captives. He will teach them the language, the literature, the culture, the clothing, and the cuisine of the Chaldeans. They will attend the University of Babylon, be prepared for inside track careers in Babylon Incorporated. Captains of industry, leaders in government, geniuses of technological innovation, power brokers, and icons of success. They will occupy elite positions that preserve the glamour and culture of the Babylonian Empire. They will experience the gospel of prosperity, of success, happiness, and me first. Living in exile, these young people had to sort out their place in an alien culture. What could they say yes to? And what must they say no to? Some things they could accept. The education, the political system, the local dress, and the local names. They were viewed as insiders, yet they lived with a sharp sense of boundaries. Perhaps we could say that they resolved the question of relating to culture by a simple rule. Let them make us Chaldeans in all the ways that do not matter. But we shall be faithful to God in the ways that matter. The non-negotiables of their lives were based on one idea: God first. And then the defining test came. A golden image was erected on the plains of Dura. Nebuchadnezzar was intent on using religion to solidify his political power. A grand event of monumental proportions and pressure is staged and choreographed with artistic precision. All the people of influence were there. The Bible record in Daniel chapter 3 speaks 3 times about the assembly of officials, satraps, administrators, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces. An awesome array of powerful people. The orderliness and inclusiveness of the parade stirs nationalistic fervor. This is the empire at its best. Pomp and circumstance dampen discernment of what is really happening. 4 times the Bible describes the music that marks the ceremonies. The horns, flutes, lyres, psalteries in symphony with all kinds of music. It was sensory overload, perhaps the equivalent of a modern rock concert. Have you witnessed the power of music to overwhelm the senses and the mind, to induce movement and thought, as if a conductor has taken over your mental and muscular machinery? The music and the masterful choreography events induces a wave of groupthink, where everyone does what everyone else is doing, bowing to the image, except for 3 young people, an insignificant minority in a vast assembly. But they are protesters, and Nebuchadnezzar's insecurity is exposed immediately. He has prepared for this just in case. Without any diplomacy or negotiation, the young men are faced with a decision to comply or die. Without any hesitation, they state their position. Here's the astonishing thing. How could 3 young men who had risen through the ranks by sheer grit find the fortitude to renounce everything they had just gained? Babylon was their jewel, their accomplishment against all odds. What was their secret? We know the outcome of the story. They didn't bow down, and they were sent to the flames. And they were protected not from the flames, but in the flames. For a moment, let's imagine the moment of decision. Everything is at stake. Everything is at risk. Their defining moment has come. Now, there's an interesting word that has come into the English language because of a conflict in the Old Testament between the Ephraimites and the Gileadites. These were 2 tribes, related tribes. Everybody kind of looked alike, but there was an issue of conflict between them. And when they went to battle, they couldn't figure out who was who. So Jephthah, the Gileadite, decided on asking a question. Whenever a Gileadite met someone they didn't know, they would say, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If the person said no, there was a second question. The second question was this: say the word Shibboleth. Now, the Ephraimites had kind of a slightly different accent. They could only say Sibboleth. This one variant in their speech revealed their true identity and loyalties. Unfortunately, the wrong accent cost them their lives. And from this incident in history, there has passed into the English language the word Shibboleth. It means a defining characteristic of a person, a simple truth about one that, if known, is indicative of a much larger frame of understanding. For example, do you like durian? Might be a shibboleth for determining who has lived and worked in Asia. North Americans and Australians have a shibboleth on the pronunciation of T-O-D-A-Y, today or to die. These young men had a shibboleth, a defining truth about their identity. The position they had adopted for life was that nothing, no person, no thing, no ideology, no circumstance, no pressure, no incentive, no promise, no threat would push God out of the center of their lives. Neither prosperity nor adversity, neither privilege nor privation, neither affluence nor affliction could reset their life's compass. Our remembrance of this story, the awareness of our present context, invites us to consider 5 observations about life under subtle pressure. Life under not-so-subtle pressure also. Number 1, preserving and maintaining a Christian identity in a predominantly secular society may be the most difficult challenge a person of faith will encounter. Christians cannot isolate themselves from their environment. They must work out how to relate to the situation and society in which they live. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, writing from his prison cell the day before he knew he was going to be put to death, said, "During the last year or so, I've come to appreciate the worldliness of Christianity as never before. I thought I could acquire faith by trying to live a holy life or something like it. Later I discovered, and am still discovering, to this very moment, that it is only by living completely in the world that one learns to believe." You know, being a Christian, an intentional follower of Jesus, means living more deeply in the world, not less. Jesus does not want us to withdraw from human life in order to be faithful, but to plunge ourselves into life in the world. Jesus is, in fact, the great yes to life. Following him means living more intentionally, more passionately, exposing oneself to more love, more pain, more joy, more suffering, more laughter, and more tears. This is where the challenge is fully engaged. How do I participate in my environment and yet not lose my bearings as a follower of Jesus Christ? Number 2, adjustment to culture and environment is different from assessing and challenging culture and environment. The life of faith calls for commitment to certain foundational principles. Faith must be lived in every situation, must be defended against subtle intrusion. Faith always makes a difference. It informs one how to live an authentic Christ-like life in Babylon or Jerusalem, in Sydney or the Sahara. These commitments cannot be casual or half-hearted. They must be firm and fixed. They are more than New Year's resolutions, because the gods of this world continually masquerade as good things that are not incompatible with Christian life. But in the course of time, they sap spiritual vitality and blunt moral discernment, the ability to distinguish between the trivial and the timeless, the ephemeral and the eternal, the gloss and the genuine. I read a story about a man who was given a physical exam. He had some serious health issues, and so his doctor advised, the best thing you can do is to stop smoking and drinking. The man thought quietly for a moment and then said, "Doctor, what is the next best thing?" You see, Christian commitments cannot be half-hearted and casual or temporary. They display their resilience only when they are embraced with thoughtful reflection and firm resolve. Number 3, God is worthy of our worship because of who he is, the Lord, the Creator, Creator of the universe, sovereign of the cosmos, holy and eternal. Not because of what he does to facilitate my agenda. Notice the amazing declaration of the 3 young Hebrews. Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, we will not serve your gods. Those 3 words, but if not, underscore a relationship with God that is independent of what he does for me. He is worthy of worship for who he is, not for the sake of concessions that I can obtain from him. Instead, in spite of current unfavorable and dangerous circumstances, he can be counted on to always do what is best. He will order the events of history and vindicate the cause of his people. He will bring us home safely. God is God. Whether he chooses to intervene on the human stage in a particular way or not, his majesty, his righteousness, his worthiness to be worshiped do not depend on any given set of conditions that human beings might devise. Number 4, a defining purpose, a fixed foundation, an unchanged reference point in life both captivates and liberates. Just as we need a compass or a global positioning device to orient ourselves in unfamiliar territory, we need a GPS to orient ourselves in the landscape of ideas, values, priorities, and purposes. In the light of a defining purpose, we discover both the extent and boundaries of human freedom. He who obeys the compass can enjoy the freedom of the sea. He who has no compass is captive to every wind and wave. There may be an enduring lesson from a physical landmark in New York City, Brooklyn Bridge is a famous landmark spanning the East River in New York City. At the time it opened in 1883, it was the largest suspension bridge in the world. People were afraid it would fall into the water. It was too big to be suspended in the air. Work on the Brooklyn Tower began first, and the New York Tower later on. When the New York Tower was being built, a lot of time went by, a lot of money was being spent, and people couldn't see anything. An engineer wrote to the paper and said, "To those of you who are wondering what is going on the bridge, let me tell you that what is built beneath the water on the New York side of the river is more than what you see above the water on the Brooklyn side." The chief engineer's statement illustrates a vital truth about leadership. It's the work that is done inside the heart and mind, where people cannot see, that determines whether a leader will stand the test of time and circumstance. It's the inner life where God sees, that informs, stabilizes, sustains, or weakens and corrodes the life. This inner work is accomplished by worship, by devotion, by prayer, reflection about ethics, morals, and values. Perhaps the life principle that is most important for us to understand is when you guard your secret life with God, your public life will care for itself. This brings us to the fifth and final observation of our meditation this morning. When my life is centered on God, His presence ignites a far-reaching and effective witness. How to live in a secular environment while remaining anchored to God and eternal realities is not the only question with which we wrestle. The other side of the coin is, how do we communicate the gospel to nations, tongues, tribes, and peoples, the objects of God's love and redemptive purposes? What programs should we adopt? In what technologies should we invest in order to ignite our witness and light up the darkness? Surely every church pastor and every church member in Sydney ponders this question: how will we reach the masses? I bring to your attention some comforting and provocative ideas written over a century ago by a special messenger of God to this faith community. Let's take it slowly. Christ's followers have no need to try to shine. If they will behold constantly the life of Christ, they will be changed in mind and heart into the same image. Then they will shine without any superficial attempt. The Lord asks for no display of goodness. In the gift of His Son, He's made provision that our inward lives may be imbued with the principles of heaven. It's the appropriation of this provision that will lead to a manifestation of Christ to the world. When the people of God experience the new birth, their honesty, their uprightness, their fidelity, their steadfast principles will unfailingly reveal it. Therefore, my brothers and sisters in Sydney, in your journey along the complex and confusing pathways of pursuing a career and following the Lord Jesus Christ, I hope you will recall from time to time the story of 3 young men in Babylon who sorted out the vexing questions of how to live in an alien culture. 3 young men who left a legacy of courage that emanates from a singular devotion to God. For the truth is that every day you will encounter intersections that demand a decisive response. Turn in one direction and you will move almost imperceptibly farther and farther from God, deeper and deeper into the worship of trivial gods of this world and the emptiness of life without transcendent dimensions. The pressures of the world around us can be so subtle as to be unnoticed, or so brazen and confrontational as to induce fear. There's a story of Robert Louis Stevenson, best known for his adventure Treasure Island. As a child, he was in very poor health and spent much of his young years at home. One night his nurse found him with his nose pressed against the frosty pane of his bedroom window. "Child, come away from there," she ordered. "You'll catch your death from cold." But young Robert wouldn't budge. He sat mesmerized as he watched an old lamplighter slowly working his way through the black night, lighting each street lamp along his route. Pointing, Robert exclaimed, See what I'm seeing. Look there. There's a man poking holes in the darkness. Poking holes in the darkness. What a marvelous picture of our calling, our privilege, our defining purpose as light in this world. And when you anchor your life to Jesus Christ, you will find a life worth living, and you will be light in darkness.